Doug Yoakum with National Demographics Corporation. National Demographics Corporation was one of the consultants that went through a competitive bidding process with the county, and we selected NDC for their years of experience. So we're very excited to have a pro on redistricting here. But in order for them to do their job, we need to hear from the public. And so we're very excited for a great in-person turnout, actually. And also seeing a lot of participants online, so we're very excited for the turnout today. So before we get started, would like to pass it over to Supervisor Desmond with some opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Courtney, and thank you all for being here, everybody here in person and everybody online participating. And yes, a little feedback. And Courtney and Doug, really appreciate your efforts in the outreach in the community. I mean, the whole purpose of these workshops, and like Courtney said, the third one, District 3, third workshop, there's going to be 2 more for, I forget which districts, District 5.
1 and 5.
1 and
yep.
5. But the board has had a couple workshops, and we'll be having additional workshops. The whole purpose of these workshops is to try to maximize public engagement and education about the redistricting process, so everybody's voice gets to be heard in this process. This is my first time going through the redistricting process, and it's all about the public outreach and education. So I really encourage you to ask questions about the process, to make your comments known about what your concerns are with respect to redistricting, and just really look forward to hearing from you and really maximizing the participation in the community tonight. So
Great.
Thank you very much for having me, Courtney.
Great, thank you so much, Supervisor. It's great to have our supervisors here as well as the public, especially in District 3, where I was actually already talking to some participants about how you don't really have city representation. So it's so important that the community here in District 3 in the unincorporated county really hear from the supervisor, and we know from board meetings how much you advocate for the unincorporated areas. So it's really exciting to be here, and hope we all get some great participation from it. Now, how to participate, I have a few announcements as we are doing this hybrid event, trying to make it as accessible as possible with in-person attendance and also virtual attendance. So how to participate. The county is hosting this in-person virtual workshop to provide an overview of the redistricting process and give a demonstration on the mapping tools and allow for public comment. Public input is vital to a successful redistricting project, so we want to make sure we allow plenty of time to ask questions and provide feedback. National Demographics Corporation, or NDC, will give about a 15-minute presentation, and then we will have a video and open it up for public comments. Community members can make a comment in person, by phone, or submit comments through the Zoom Q&A feature. It is important to note that any phone comments or questions submitted through Zoom Q&A will become part of the official public record and posted to our redistricting website. We will start with in-person comments first, then move to the phone line, and then to the Zoom Q&A feature. And we will circle through until there are no more public comments. To make a public comment by phone during tonight's presentation, please dial 916-875-2500 and choose option number 1. Then follow the prompts to be placed in the queue. You may be on hold for up to an extended period, and your patience is appreciated. I will then ask staff to transfer each caller into the workshop, and they will have at least 3 minutes to provide input. The chat feature will not be available through Zoom, but you can submit questions through the Q&A feature, and I will read those questions out loud. Language interpretation services are available in all languages. Please call the public comment phone line at 916-875-2500, and staff will connect you with an interpreter. You and the language interpreter will be transferred into the workshop to make a comment. Additional time will be given to callers who are using the interpretation service. There will also be American Sign Language interpreter on your screen. Please be mindful of the time to avoid being interrupted or disconnected. More time may be considered as long as we have an opportunity to hear from all interested participants. Thank you in advance for your courtesy and your understanding. It is our goal to give everyone the opportunity to provide input in this redistricting process. If you are experiencing technical difficulties, please send a text or call the clerk's office at 916-599-0112. You can also send an email to boardclerk@saccounty.net, and staff will provide assistance. To submit a written comment at any time, you can always email redistricting@saccounty.net, or you can also mail your comments to 700 H Street, Suite 2450, Sacramento 95814, and attention it to the clerk of the board, because it's important that all public comments will be evaluated during this redistricting process. And I would like to thank the Department of Technology, the County Executive's Office, and the Clerk of the Board's Office for putting together this workshop tonight. So without further ado, let's learn about redistricting. I hear that term. What does that mean, Doug?
Good evening. Thank you, Courtney. My name is Doug Uchium. I work for National Demographics Corporation. We've been hired by Sacramento County to help Sacramento residents and the board through the process of redistricting this year. It's a little more complicated than it used to be. 10 years ago, it was simply a board process where they figured out where the lines were going to go, and then they voted on them. This year, the legislature passed, as I'll describe in a minute, a law that basically requires all cities and counties in California to go through a specified process that allows for public participation and encourages public participation. So we'll go through that right now. I just wanted to say that National Demographics is a statewide company. We do this kind of work all over the state, but I'm not a foreigner. I am a Sacramento resident, and it's my pleasure to help the board and all of you through the process this year. So let's talk a little bit about the schedule that's been decided upon this year. We're already pretty much well into it. This is our third workshop in each of the districts in the county. And the board has already had a couple of hearings, public hearings, that were required to have prior to the release of any maps. And we're at the point, here we are, we're at the point where just that last week, the United States Census Bureau released officially the census numbers for all jurisdictions in the country. Basically, there was a long delay in this process because of COVID and other issues. But finally, last week, the Census Bureau released what I call a machine-readable version of statistics for all cities and counties in America. But it's machine-readable. It's not readable by humans. So the data experts at the state are now working on it. And then by the end of September, around October 1st, there will be a statewide version of that data that can be used by all, not only by the state redistricting commission that does legislative districts and congressional districts, but by cities and counties. So that database will not be ready until late September at the earliest. After that, we've set a deadline of October 15th for people in Sacramento County to put together some maps and submit them to the county for consideration. At their November 2nd hearing, which is the third official hearing, where they will where they will actually look at maps and consider what direction they want these maps to go. And then, I'm sorry. And then around the middle of November, November 16th, they've scheduled their 4th official board hearing, where they will actually adopt a map and then go through the process of putting it into ordinance form with the second reading and final adoption on December 7th. All counties in the state are required to finish this process by December 15th of this year. So let's talk a little bit about what the rules are and the laws that we must follow when doing redistricting in counties in California. The first and foremost rule is that each district must be substantially equal in population. That means basically they have to be equal or pretty close to it. We have to follow the Federal Voting Rights Act, which means that when you draw districts, you cannot discriminate against a protected class of voters by either dividing them or combining them in a way that deprives them of their opportunity to elect a candidate for supervisor of their choice. And that basically means no racial gerrymandering. You can't split a community. You cannot specifically put together a community specifically for the purpose of discriminating against them in their ability to elect a candidate of their choice. Then the state has enacted, as part of this Fair Maps Act, new specific rules for how counties draw districts. The first rule is they have to be contiguous. In other words, they have to be connected. You cannot have one part of a district in one part of the county and another part in another part of the county and not be connected. You have to go through a process of deciding what neighborhoods are important to citizens in that county, and what communities of interest are important. And I'll go into the specifics of that in a minute. But basically, what we're trying to find is what is your neighborhood? What neighborhood do you think should be kept together in a district, and what socioeconomic or geographic area you think should be kept together in a district? That's the community of interest deadline. What issues unite people in a community, and should that community be kept together in one district, or should it be separated into more than one district? Cities and census-designated places, to the extent possible, should be kept together within districts in the county. Cities, we all know what they are: Folsom, Rancho Cordova, Elk Grove. Those are all cities. To the extent possible, when we draw districts, we keep them within one district. Census-designated places are Fair Oaks is a census-designated place. Orangevale is a census-designated place. Wilton, just outside of Elk Grove, is a census-designated place. So when we see these areas on a map, and CDP means that the Census Bureau has drawn a line around them and given a definition of what they are, those have to be kept together to the extent that we can within the equal population requirements. When we draw these districts, we have to use easily identifiable boundaries. That means rivers, streams, lakes, large arterial streets, freeways. To the extent we use those as boundaries for districts so that people can easily identify them on a map, and so that they don't meander through neighborhoods and confuse people as to whether or not, when they look at a map, they are within one district or another. So to the extent possible, we're going to use easily identifiable boundaries when we draw districts. And finally, the districts have to be compact. And by that we mean that you don't bypass a large number of people in one area to get to a large number of people in another area. So that's the definition of compactness that's included in the new state law. You can't bypass large numbers of people to get to other people. And there is only one specifically prohibited area in the new law, and that is that districts shall not favor or discriminate against a political party. But there are other traditional redistricting principles that have often been used when drawing districts. And since the Fair Maps Act does not prohibit them and does not specifically require them, they are optional to be used when we draw districts here in Sacramento County. One is that you don't want to minimize the the number of voters who are shifted between districts and their election years. As you know, county supervisors are elected for 4-year terms, and some people in Sacramento County are expecting to elect a supervisor in 2022, and a lot of others are expecting to have an election in 2024 in the districts they're currently in. To the extent possible, we want to minimize the number of people that are shifted, especially from a district that expects an election next year into a district that delays their election by 2 more years. So to the extent possible, you can consider districts that don't do that. There's also a traditional principle of respecting the voters' choice of who they elected the last time, and that is basically not putting supervisors in the same district together, forcing them to run against each other. If you were elected in 2022 and you suddenly were put in a district that doesn't have an election until 2024, that kind of discriminates against the person who was elected by that group of voters. So to the extent possible, we might want to respect the voters' choices on those particular issues. You can, if you wish, when you draw districts, consider future population growth. And by that I mean, if you know an area is going to have a large growth over the next 10 years until the next census, you can underpopulate that district to accommodate for that growth, and that would then force you to overpopulate a district next to it that maybe doesn't have as much growth over the next 10 years. So that's an equalization factor that you can consider when you draw districts. You can also, when you start drawing districts, preserve the core of the existing district and say, okay, we're just going to look at these districts here as they're drawn 10 years ago and consider shifts in order to adjust for population, and then leave it at that. You can do that, but in most areas, there must be changes because there has been large amounts of growth over the last 10 years, and so you have to redraw districts to accommodate for that. So, but you can start from scratch. Instead of starting from scratch, you can start from your existing districts and consider going from there. So what are we looking for when we talk about neighborhoods? And that's what we're hoping to hear from in these particular workshops. What is your neighborhood? What do you consider the area that you live in? And what kind of districts unite the people that live around? What kind of issues unite the people around you that give you reason to think that it should be kept together in a particular district? And you can have several ways to define your neighborhood. You can define it by streets. You can define it by, well, we've always been around this particular school. The school is important to our community, so we have a lot of community activities there, or a park. Anything that defines a community for you, we'd like to hear about it so that we can make sure that if it's possible, we keep that community together in a district. communities of interest are a little different, and they're defined in state law as having a socioeconomic issue or concern that unites that community, in that keeping it together within a single district for purpose will give it effective and fair representation on that issue. So if you're united around the transportation issue or a law enforcement issue or housing and type of housing that is in your community or that may be in your community in the future, those kind of issues unite people with an interest, and you can say that is our interest and we'd like to keep this community together in order for that interest to be properly represented on the Board of Supervisors. That's the kind of thing we're looking for. And again, a community of interest is not something that's united around a political candidate or a political party or an incumbent that's already on the board. Those are not communities of interest. So we'd love to hear from you all, either here in the room when time for public comment comes up, or since we're online, you can do it online. And here's the phone number once again for folks to call if they want to get in line and make a public comment over the phone. So thank you very much, and I look forward to answering any questions that you have.
Hey, Doug, I have a question for you.
Absolutely.
When you were talking about the, actually you brought it up in the context of preserving the core of existing districts. If someone submits a map, for instance, that changes just 2 of the 5 supervisory districts, I mean, does every district have to change necessarily, or could only a couple districts within a jurisdiction change?
Oh, it's possible that only a couple of districts or 2 or 3 might have to change. As you know, by the estimates that we made a couple of months ago, the District 1 and District 2, by our estimates, this is before the official census data came out, look like they are within a 1% margin of what the ideal district would be in Sacramento County, which is, by the way, 307,000 people each. That's our estimate. And so if you didn't change District 1 or 2, that's fine. Let's move on.
As long as none of those other factors are in play, obviously.
Right. But if reuniting a city or reuniting a community changes those districts, then obviously the other changes in the rest of the county have to be made.
No, I think that's important to note, though, because as the public draws their own maps or comes up with their ideas, that nothing necessarily requires all of the districts to change. I think that's just an important point.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point to, remember that, okay, the main goal of this, right, is to even out our populations, make sure they're as equitable as possible. Then we look under that criteria under the Fair Maps Act now, which applies to counties and cities throughout California. It's important to note that what we are doing here for the Board of Supervisors is different than other jurisdictions. So there might be some rules that you hear about or requirements that a city might do, or for the Senate or Assembly districts that they might have to look at or consider, especially if something like a charter's in place. But for the County of Sacramento, it's a board-managed process where they take public input and follow the Fair Maps Act. And so whether or not there are changes and how that looks, of course, will depend on what we hear from the public. Now, we also, sorry, I got a little feedback there. Maybe if I just do this? Okay. One of the things, while we heard from Doug, we're just, there is some census data that's been released so far that they're working on scrubbing, and then we will get that data out and we will have a more accurate estimate, but we do have some estimates so far. But the reason why we wanted to start these workshops over the summer is knowing, because of the delay, we're going to be working on a very tight timeline with the board hearings. You saw, as Doug was showing, the timeline deadline, that the hearings take place in November and it's going to go very fast. So we want the public to be aware of how to participate now, so when the time comes, they're able to either log on through a mapping tool, or something they can do now is our wonderful community of interest form. Doug went over what a community of interest is, and it's something that, again, can combine you through socioeconomic reasons. It could be languages, something too, again, knowing that we're working with District 3, large unincorporated area. I mean, you have municipal services in addition to health services, and, well, basically all services through the county. So it's really going to be important to make sure that we hear from these communities of interest. So to show a little bit, we have a community of interest form, and we do have hard copies here. We also have this online as well. Hopefully it will pop over to community of interest form. Oh man, did I break it? So we have this great form. Hey, all right, yeah. You guys are just messing with me, all right. So we have this great form, and this form, please note, you can use this in any redistricting efforts that you are participating in, or if you've already submitted some redistricting ideas or communities of interest to the state, we'll take those comments too. So it doesn't have to be on this form, but it can be. So we have this communities of interest testimony that tells you what a community of interest is and why it's important. So again, we try to equal out those populations, but we don't want to divide populations and then dilute their voting power. So we have this form and it's fillable online to kind of prompt people to think about what their community of interest is. So we have this here, and I don't actually know if anyone wants to participate and do a community of interest form right now, but we can. You could fill out your name, how long you've lived or worked in the district, and then why you'd want to keep your community together. So what binds you as a community? Is it languages? Is it services? Is it where your kids go to school? Is it where you go to church, where your parks are? Neighborhood associations, businesses, environmental impacts, all of those things we want to hear about. Then we have, if you go down, we have my community is located, and gives you an opportunity for any sort of physical boundaries. Maybe you want to be very specific on where you are between, Sunrise and Hazel, or that growth in back of Bella Vista High School that's popping up as well. So where you're kind of located in the community as far as physical boundaries, if that helps. And please note, you can fill as much or as little as you want on this. It's anything to kind of help us. And then you can also share how your community is similar to other neighborhoods in the area. And maybe it is something like, hey, we're kind of similar to areas near Carmichael, because we're all in this unincorporated area together. And that's okay. We want to hear that as well. And then how you're different from following neighborhoods. And then any sort of common history or information that you feel is important as the demographers work to provide some draft maps to the board. So, Doug, can you kind of elaborate a little bit more on knowing we're going to have these communities of interest forms, we're going to be showing mapping tools in a moment. How are you going to take all this into consideration when you propose maps for the board to vote on?
What we'll do is, to the extent we can, we're going to try to sort through all of the comments, find ones that are similar to each other, and say, these four folks have this particular concern, or these four maps, sample maps, are kind of similar in where they're going. Then group them together and explain to the board what folks in this community or this community are thinking. Then we'll consolidate them and say, okay, this amount of people have this opinion, or this amount of people have this opinion, and we'll calculate all that and try to figure out if there's a large group over here and a small group that just has this particular concern over here. Anyway, we'll categorize and summarize, and then we will come up with a solution. It's our job to come up with a redistricting plan that meets most of these concerns and also meets the concerns that we hear from the board members themselves as to how the district should go.
Great.
So that's how a redistricting plan is put together. We hear from the public, here's what you want. We hear from other parts of the community as to what they want, and then try to come up with a solution that brings everything together.
Great. Well, you have your work cut out for you. So again, now we have the communities of interest form, but we also have some options for submitting actually maps online. We have some great mapping tools and a variety of them to be able to use and submit your either communities of interest or your ideas for boundaries that way as well. So if we can go ahead and queue up the video for the mapping tool overview, and then of course we do have Doug here for any specific questions on the tools. For those that are here in person, we also have some laptops set up. If you wanted to try it out today, you are more than welcome. So we have all that for you. But let's get an idea of what kind of tools are available.
How to submit maps for redistricting. There is a map submission tool for every level of experience and interest, from simple paper maps that you just draw on to complex technical maps with lots of data layers and online submission. Let's discuss which tools are right for you. Step 1. Get informed. Learn more about your district, neighborhood, or community of interest. Resources are available to you in easy-to-read informational maps. They provide population, demographic, and geographical information by using estimated 2020 census data. The story map includes a wide array of geographic and demographic data arranged like a PowerPoint presentation. These simple maps are interactive as you step your way through them to see details about districts and tracts. They can be a great reference for you when you tell your community story to the county. As public map submissions become available, they will be added to the story map as well. The interactive review map is a powerful tool packed full of layered data such as population, demographics, citizen voting age, and various council and service plan boundaries. Once the redistricting draft maps are ready for release in November of 2021, they'll be added as layers to this tool as well. Step 2. Draw a map. After learning more about the tools and resources available to you, choose a mapping tool and method that works best for you. Simple paper maps are available in 2 formats: estimated population data and city, freeways, and census designated places data. These simple one-page printable maps can be drawn on and notated, then submitted to the county for consideration. There is also a Microsoft Excel supplemental file available to help calculate the populations if you prefer. Powerful online mapping tools provide greater detail and more layers and features when drawing your districts, neighborhoods, and communities of interest. These tools allow users to save and submit their maps to the county online. The District R online mapping tool is a simple online paintbrush tool that allows you to paint your neighborhood, your community of interest, or a full countywide district map. You can select areas to include in your map, erase unwanted areas, mark important places and landmarks, and add comments to describe your map. The most powerful mapping tool is the Caliper Maptitude online tool. This tool enables you to draw districts by census block with all the demographic data used by the county's demographic consultants. You can fine-tune your district lines and district boundaries, or draw entirely new ones. The tool provides population counts and demographics of the districts you draw to show the impacts of moving the lines. You can see in real time how your proposed map lines would impact districts. The county redistricting website has some short user training videos that explain the features and steps needed to create, save, and submit your maps. We encourage you to review them. Step 3. Submit your map. If you chose an online option, then you can simply submit through the online tool. Or, if you prefer, you may also print and send to the county by email, mail, or drop it off in person. If you chose the paper-only option, you have the same options to email, mail, or drop off in person. For email, please send to redistricting@saccounty.net. To submit by mail or to drop it off in person, please send to Clerk of the Board, Attention, Redistricting, 700 H Street, Suite 2450, Sacramento, California, 95814. Please note that all submissions are part of the public record and will be posted in their entirety to the public comments webpage. For more information on the redistricting process and what you can do to participate, please visit the website redistricting2021.saccounty.net.
All right, wonderful. So a few different options there on how to submit with the mapping tools. So communities of interest form, mapping tools, or even just your own notes. We'll on the back of a napkin. We'll take it all. So I think now we can go ahead, and we want to make sure we have plenty of time for public comment and hear from you all. So unless you had any other questions, we can open it to the public.
No?
Okay, great. So does anyone here in the room have any either public comments or questions? You can either use this as part of your public testimony, or you can use it to ask questions and we can answer them. So if anyone is interested, we would ask you go ahead and come up to the mic. No pressure. Come on up.
Remember, we need to make sure the online user or listeners can hear you too.
Yes, yes.
So my question is, since the district,
Oh, yeah, good job. Oh, it doesn't go. Oh, there we go.
my question is, since the districts are based on equal in population, Courtney, how would the prison population affect the districts?
Good question.
That is a good question.
Very good question. Here's what's going to happen. There's a new state law that requires the statewide database, which is what is used by the state and all cities and counties in California, to reallocate prison populations back to their home communities. So what's going to happen is, and what is already in the process of happening right now, is the state Department of Corrections is telling the statewide database where the people who are in the institution, where they all came from. So if they came from Los Angeles or San Diego or San Francisco or Fair Oaks, that individual will be reassigned back to their original address wherever they came from. Therefore, and this is important for the city of Folsom, when you see a map of Folsom and you see the census tract that Folsom Prison is located in, that prison will have a zero population. That census tract will have zero population, because all of the people who are in that institution have been assigned back to where their original home was. So in Susanville, where that huge prison is, zero. Folsom, where the prison is, where the two prisons are, zero. Those particular parts of Folsom have zero population as far as redistricting is concerned. So those institutions, quote, don't count, unquote, when you're drawing districts.
And Doug, do you know, is that part of the Fair Maps Act, or was that a
No,
separate legislation?
that law went in 2004 before the Fair Maps was even considered. The legislature required the Department of Corrections to come up with a database for use by the statewide database, which is basically the property of the legislature, to allocate all prisoners back to their original locations.
Oh, interesting. I didn't realize it was since 2004. Just haven't had a chance to do it yet.
Yeah.
No, okay. All right, thank you, and thank you for that question. That's a really good question. Does anyone else here have a question, comment, any public testimony to give?
I'll be brave.
Looking at you, Ralph.
Feel
No,
free.
just kidding. Yeah.
Thank you for having this public outreach. It's very important. Just by way of introduction, I've been in Fair Oaks for 44 years. I've been on the CPAC for a total of 10 years, Rotary for about 34 years, and Historical Society for about 33 years. I've been president about 4 times of the Historical Society, and one of the instigators of the 2005 incorporation study for Fair Oaks and Orangevale, which didn't go anywhere. My big concern is about the identity of Fair Oaks. Last 10 years ago, the proposal was to transfer, we were District 4 then. They were going to cut the district at Sunrise, and half of Fair Oaks would be stay in District 4, and the other half would go to District 3. I think we were the only community that was going to be cut that way. So my big push is that we keep Fair Oaks all in one supervisorial district. And to that end, I wanted to just explain some of the boundaries. The map that you show here for Fair Oaks is basically correct for the zip code. And back in the 80s, Supervisor String helped pull together some of the boundaries so they'd be similar. The Planning Advisory Council boundaries are the same as the zip code, with the exception of anything west of San Juan falls in the Carmichael CPAC area, even though they have a Fair Oaks zip code, address, and to a large degree identity. At the time, we did learn that the people west of San Juan also have a very strong Carmichael identity. The Park District about that time did a survey of those portions of Fair Oaks zip code that were in other districts. For example, the area north of Madison in Orangevale, there was a section of all the way down to Madison that was still in the Orangevale CPAC, and so that was adjusted to go up to Pershing, where the zip code boundary is. So we're kind of a unique community out here. We were founded in 1895, about 6 years after Orangevale was subdivided. These two communities out here, along with what was Citrus Heights and around Sylvan Corners, were the major new subdivisions out here that joined the small city of Folsom. And it's got a very strong identity as a community. I think everybody knows where the boundaries are, and I'm an advocate that the people that put Fair Oaks on their address basically identify with Fair Oaks. So I'm just encouraging you to stick with that boundary for the district edges. So that's my pitch.
Thank you very
Ralph.
much.
And now we know why you're such an invaluable member of the Historical Society.
Yes, that was impressive.
I didn't even begin.
Thank you, Ralph.
Yeah, that's great feedback. And
Ralph, I was involved somewhat with the Citrus Heights Incorporation, and this was before Supervisor Desmond's time, but when that went in front of the board, there was a revolt because the city of Citrus Heights was all the way down to Madison. And I remember Carmichael and Fair Oaks people came in, and they were just irate. They did not want to be part of the city.
I think I was one of those people. I got personally escorted by the new city manager out of the meeting. after they formed the city of Citrus Heights, they did, as you know, respect the boundaries, with the exception of arguing over whether they'd get the tax-rich Sunrise Mall, and they eventually worked out an agreement. Well, right after that, they decided that my section of Fair Oaks, which is around Bella Vista High School, north of Madison, was going to be in their sphere of influence. So we and the people from Orangevale went down there and protested, and yeah. So at that point, the city council, I don't think you were there, but the city council said, if nobody's going to say anything nice about this, we're going to close the hearing. And they shut out people like me, who was representing the Fair Oaks. Well, I don't think I was on the park board then, but I think I was representing Rotary. The people from Orangevale, public officials, were shut out of that. And so I kind of made a scene, and they escorted me out.
So we know to keep our eye on you. Is that what? Yeah.
I won't do that tonight.
You know, and you bring up a good point too, that I think, you know, I think a lot of us, especially, you know, we look at the mailing addresses and we look at the zip codes, and Citrus Heights is a great example of, there's people with the Citrus Heights zip code and city mailing address that aren't actually in the city of Citrus Heights. And so I think sometimes that can be really confusing. So I'm actually glad you brought that up.
Thank you. Can I add, too, that before the zip codes were established in the early 60s, the Fair Oaks address went all the way out practically to the Placer County line. It included San Juan High School. It was all part of the postal route and had a Fair Oaks address. But when the zip codes were established, it was narrowed down. And the late Ansel Hoffman is actually one of the people that protected the Bella Vista section there, that area, and kept it within the Fair Oaks zip code.
Oh, thank you. That is impressive. We're going to have to get coffee sometime. And yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you coming forward on camera. That's great. Anyone else want to either have questions or provide your own public testimony before we move to the phones? Yeah, please come on up. Thank you.
I'm Pat Wilcox, and I've lived in District 3 for 51 years. And when we first moved out there, there were wheat fields around us, you know, and there were 4 lanes of the freeway, 2 lanes each way on the east side of the road. The west side of the freeway was not even there yet. And the bridge over Interstate 80 was 2 lanes, 1 lane each way. So yes. But the community out there is basically single-family dwellings. There are some duplexes up that way. Oh, I don't know whether they're in District 3 or not, though. I'd have to look and see. But anyway, it's a very family-oriented. Sunrise Park District is our park district out there, and they put on a lot of activities and parks for us, so it makes it very convenient to take your family and go to the park. So I'm looking at this and saying, oh, you know, they're single-family dwellings by and large.
And that's important feedback to know too. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Right, kind of the family unit dwellings, and how the, you know, how even zoning areas, I mean, all that sort of thing is definitely something we want to take into consideration as the board has to make some tough decisions when the time comes. That's great. Thank you so much.
So Pat, are you in old Foothill Farms or new Foothill Farms?
I'm in Foothill Oaks.
Oh, Foothill Oaks, okay,
Yes,
okay.
That's even newer.
Yes, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, and thanks for coming down tonight. Anyone else that's here that wants to either ask a question or provide any public testimony? No? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and check with staff on the phone and see if we have anyone in the queue that has a question or comment.
This is Darrell with the clerk of the board. There are currently no verbal comments in queue at this time.
Okay, no comments on the phone. Thank you very much for checking. And now let's go ahead and go to the Zoom Q&A feature. So we have a good amount of participants here. And this is a great question. How will you notify the public about the proposed maps? And do the public get to comment on those proposed maps?
The answer to the last question is yes. When you go to the redistricting website, you'll see that there is opportunity at any time to offer a public comment about either what's going on or whatever's in your head at that particular time. Perhaps we want to go to it and show where they are. But anyway, when we actually draw maps and when we see maps submitted by the public, they will be in several places. On this website, under mapping tools, you can go to District R, and that's where we encourage you to actually draw your own little maps. It's under Community Outreach. Yeah. Then go to Mapping Tools and scroll down to District R, and I'll grab it for you here. These little boxes here for you folks to draw. You can draw a 5-district complete plan, or you can just outline your community here when you click on the orange area. If you scroll down, you'll see some people have already submitted some ideas about what their particular communities are. Some of these we used in a demonstration, so they're repeated here. But some folks have commented already. And then, let's go back out of this. Under Want to Know More, you can scroll down to Public Comment, and that's where you can read written comments that have been submitted. And all you need to do to really put a comment of your own in is to just do an email. See if I can find the email address real quick. It's on our presentation. Here we are.
Yep.
It's right up at the top there. All you really need to do is put together an email and send it to that address, and it will be posted on this part of the Sacramento County Redistricting website.
And again, all public comments do get posted, so please, like in terms of like your personal address, you might want to leave some of that off. General area is okay, but just be mindful. And of course, obviously, if we see something personal, we'll contact you before we post it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do another round through just to make sure. And again, if someone does want to comment on the phone, 916-875-2500 and choose option number 1. But I'm going to go ahead and ask if anyone else here has anything else to add. I want to make sure, give you an opportunity. Okay, great. And then I'll check one more time with the clerk of the board's office for any phone calls.
There are currently no calls in queue at this time.
Thank you very much for checking. And then I think, is this the same? Oh, okay, great. We got another question through the Zoom Q&A. Who has the ultimate say on the map that is adopted?
The Sacramento County Board of Supervisors. They must adopt it just like any other ordinance that they're putting together by majority vote. They decide what final plan is selected.
So the board makes the decision.
That's correct.
But you, as our demographers, will compile all the information, the public comments, the online mapping tools. You'll present it to the board, and then we have several hearings that take place in November for the public to comment once you kind of see it all laid out.
The hearings are open to the public, as is any Board of Supervisors meeting, and then before the board takes any action, they always ask if there's public testimony, and that's the time when the public can put in their opinion. in public about what they think about the map that's been drawn or is under consideration at the time.
Doug, I have a question for you. If, say, the public submits several maps that we will consider at the board, but then you also get a community of interest form that maybe is inconsistent with any of those maps that the public has submitted, would NDC prepare a map that maybe incorporates that community of interest form or suggestion for the board's consideration?
It's certainly possible that there may be a map that's submitted by a member of the public that doesn't take someone else's community of interest
Right.
into consideration. We would point that out to the board
Okay.
and say, okay, here's a map that's been submitted, and hopefully it's a legal map. It's equally populous and doesn't split cities and stuff like that. But then someone says, well, it's really important for Wilton to be with Elk Grove, and that particular map it omitted that or didn't do it. We'd point that out to the board.
Okay, and then could the board provide, direction to NDC, hey, we'd like you to take this map, but incorporate that suggestion from that
Absolutely.
community?
I mean,
Okay.
if there's any public map that the board becomes enamored with but has some problems, you can suggest to us what the
We
problems are.
can tweak it,
and
the board
we'll
can.
fix
Okay.
it.
Got it.
That's what we do.
Thank you.
And we got another question through the Zoom Q&A about, can the number of supervisors increase?
No. No, we had that question at the last public workshop. The state constitution requires counties to have 5 board members. So we'd have to change the constitution.
Now, Doug, when we, we saw that while we have the requirements, the federal requirements with the equal population and the Voting Rights Act compliance, then we have the state requirements under the Fair Maps Act. Then we have those other, in that third column was other considerations.
Right.
And one of them was future population growth. Kind of along the same lines is something like, for example, knowing that in District 3, we have a supervisor that is really the go-to local representative because they don't have any city representation. Is that something that can be considered as well? If we say, you know what, maybe we want it to be a little bit smaller because...
That's certainly a possibility. Let me try to think
But
of
it
an
could only
example.
be smaller
Right.
within that
That
range
deviation.
for the
Right,
deviation,
we have to draw it
population.
within a certain percentage of what the ideal population is so that we don't violate the ultimate responsibility of drawing districts, which is having equal population. I'm trying to think of an example. Folsom is going to have a lot of growth over the next 10 years. I mean, everyone knows that. They've added an entire area south of the river to their city. So eventually there's going to be a lot of homes and schools and neighborhoods that need to be represented within that city. So we could say in the district that includes Folsom, perhaps we can underpopulate that a little bit and go within a 2% range rather than 1%. And then in a district next to it, such as District 3, perhaps we overpopulate that. Did I say overpopulate? We underpopulate the Folsom area so we can overpopulate this area. It's a possibility. We call them traditional redistricting principles. Folks like myself who have been involved in this for many, many cycles and many, many years, we have things in the back of our head that we remember and we just do them. And these are some of them. The vote deferral, which is the not putting you in a district where you lose an election, that's something that's always on our minds. So there are redistricting principles, and like I said, since they're not required, you can ignore them if they're and since they're not prohibited, you can use them.
So they can kind of come in handy if we're like kind of on the border. Okay, we met it, but we're having a hard time with this one. Then we can use one of those considerations to see if that kind of helps us to draw some final boundaries.
That's correct.
Okay. And it will be interesting knowing, the growth we've had around the county and, the South County, the North County, and then kind of what that domino effect's going to be. So while we urge you all right now to get familiar with the mapping tools, you can submit your communities of interest. That's most likely not going to change, but when those maps come out in November, it's going to be really important to really watch that to make sure that with the proposals that, again, your community of interest is not being split. So we're going to want to watch that very closely.
Courtney, can I ask you a question? So I know you have a couple of laptops over here, and I went online and was trying to play around with some of the mapping tools, and it's amazing how much information is in there. But will you be able to? We have staff maybe to help some folks if they want to try out some of these. I really encourage you to take advantage of that. Would you have some Courtney and her staff and Doug here to help you with those mapping tools, because they're really great, but they can be a little bit complex. I mean, I was just an
I'd be
English
happy
major,
to help
so that's
anybody who
difficult
wants
for me,
to try something.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we have the mapping tools here to use and try, and we do have those tutorials online on our website as well. But here you can get the live in-person interaction, and yes, we do have staff here to help with that. And I agree, that Maptitude one was pretty intense. The District R one, I did like that. I thought that was pretty great, and it adds those populations together for you. And again, our goal is about that 307,000-ish that we based on the estimated data. And again, once that final data comes out, we'll have a better idea. And you can make any changes that you would like even when that time comes. So it's not like, oh, you've submitted something, that's it, you're done. No, you can submit, and you can even submit multiple communities of interest form. We have some folks that have mentioned, like an organization like Rotary, maybe they want to submit a community of interest form as a group and then do some separately. You can absolutely do that as well.
I do want to mention that when the official data does come out, all the tools on the websites will be changed to have actual official data.
Yes. Awesome. So just one final call. Any other public comments or questions? It looks like
we
so
have one.
far so good. Oh, yeah.
You spoke.
Pull the microphone down.
You spoke of the population deviation, plus or minus. What percentage is that?
Well, we recommend that you not go much past 1% deviation in each district. So if one district was 1% over and another district in the county that we draw is 1% over, your total deviation is 2%. So the laws require, the courts have required over the years that you not have any more than 10% deviation, but we're not recommending that we have a 5% deviation in any district here in the county. That would be, if you think about it, 15,000 people over in one district and 15,000 people under in another district. And some people might say that that's not equally populous. So we're going to try to stick to as close to 1% as we can.
So the more you deviate, the more kind of likelihood it could be challenged is.
Yes.
Yeah.
My question is, what has been the population growth in numbers of our county in the last 10 years? What do you have to reconcile? How many?
I apologize. I have not looked that up yet.
Yeah, because my next question was going to be which districts are underpopulated and which are overpopulated. You know, Fair Oaks has remained at a population of about 35,000 indefinitely. There's just not any growth areas here. But if you look at the Anatolia area of
Yes, District 5
Natoli's
is definitely
district.
over.
You look at the south of 50 of Folsom, and you look out towards the airport where a lot's going in. Those are obviously going to be have to be districts that give up some territory. So I think it's fair to state that District 3 is going to have to grow somewhere.
Right.
I just throw in the idea that historically, south of the river, being that it was connected by the Fair Oaks Bridge and everything, the old Natomas Company was the employment for most people in Fair Oaks, as was Aerojet later. And to some extent, a lot of Fair Okians have moved to Gold River for their retirement homes or whatever. So a logical place there would be, you know, to move south. And I don't know if the plans for Easton are still in the works, but that's a major population center. They'd be on the old Aerojet property. Yeah. I don't believe it's incorporated by Rancho Cordova at the moment.
I think a small part of it is on the west side, yeah.
And then the east side probably is part of Folsom's sphere of influence. But that's the growth area I would see for District 3 anyway.
Yeah. Thank you, Ralph. Will the maps, when people go in to look at the maps, will they, and I know you don't have the final numbers plugged in there yet, but will they show where the deviations currently are? And as you draw a map, it'll show, oh, hey, now it's all balanced out, right?
Yeah.
You know, as you draw your map.
If you look at the interactive map tool on the website, you'll see that when you start with the current districts, that based on our estimates that we provided to the county when we were first brought onto this project, you'll see that the deviations are noted there. And like I said, District 1 and 2 are pretty much within population range right now. 3 and 4 are under, and 5 is over.
So it'll be interesting to see what comes of that. Again, you have your work cut out for you. It looks like we have something through the Q&A. Oh, just someone saying they're excited to draw a map. That's exciting.
Go for it.
Yeah, that's great. And again, we want to make sure we have that opportunity here. Again, you can start doing it now and just keep an eye out. Remember to watch. We have some evening hearings as well. So we have some in the afternoon and in the evening in November. So hopefully to give folks an opportunity to watch and to comment. Luckily, it'll all be on Metro Cable, which along with this workshop will also be posted to the website. So we can refer back to it and make sure that we capture all that important public testimony that was given here tonight. So any, Supervisor Desmond, any closing remarks that you would like to make tonight?
Just want to thank you, Courtney and Doug and your staff for being here. I mean, there's a lot of county staff here, support staff behind the scenes, putting this together, this hybrid kind of meeting. So thank you all for your efforts. And I want to recognize my staff members, my chief of staff, Vanessa McCarthy Olmstead here, and Mark Colum from my office. And finally, most importantly, thank all you members of the public who are watching online and who are here in person. It's great to see you here participating in such an important feature of our democracy. So it's great to see you, and I'll be hanging around for a little while afterwards and look forward to talking with you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, and thank you for coming out tonight. And again, look for this on the website along with other meetings and hearings. And please feel free, if you have any community groups, neighborhood association, Rotary clubs, let us know if you would like us to talk with your group or do any outreach in your community. Thank you. Have a great evening and drive safely.